the ongoing tariffs. I've been diving into that a little bit.
Would also lead to a squeeze and Bitcoin running up in price.
Companies are 25, 30, 40, 50 times earnings. Why are they being valued? Are they that master executors? When it's good, we'll party, right? It's easy to talk when things are good, but it's been really fun to not have the price action while launching it because it's given us other things to talk about and like build the foundation. We really don't have a real enemy.
Yeah.
For the first time in a very long time.
Yeah.
Government's on people's side.
Thank you for joining me today. I have Trey here. You've talked before on your podcast.
I'm excited.
I want to know kind of what you want to talk about today.
There's a lot of stuff going on with like the ongoing tariffs. I've been diving into that a little bit. Obviously I have a finance background. And so it's been interesting kind of like seeing the intersection of my work with the intersection of Bitcoin. They're kind of colliding a little bit now.
What is your finance background?
Yeah, so I work in the mortgage industry. I've been in the mortgage industry since like 2 weeks after COVID is when I got into it. So it's been about 5 years. And so we're constantly not from like my position. I'm on more of like the front facing sales side of, we have to understand how to structure loans and, the risk involved in each loan and that helps us price it and all kinds of good stuff like that. But, our operations team and our like back end finance team they're heavily looking at all this data that's coming out because we're trying to project ahead of like how to run a company and be profitable, with all of this stuff going on. Like how does this, if we can't get lumber from Canada and there's tariffs on it, how does that affect home building? How does that affect our clients that are building 30, 40 properties at a time, and expecting their lumber cost to be X and it's really going to be 25% higher, which is Y. You know what I mean? And so that's, the other aspect of it is we do a lot of, 30-year term, 30-year loans for investors. And those are all tied to the treasury market, right? The bond market. So yeah, last week was kind of crazy because you had the bond market dipped to below 4% and then it shot right back up to 4.5%. It was kind of behaving, those percentages, it was kind of behaving like a shit coin a little bit, and that's not what you want out of your, out of your bond market, out of your treasury market. So all of those things kind of factor into play. But really the biggest portion of it that comes into play for us is the, how do we manage risk going forward? Because we're not a bank. We are a private debt fund. We have our own capital. We have to responsibly lend that capital out because we don't get bailouts from the U.S. government. And that's why, our interest rates are a little bit higher, but it's also, it's also why our underwriting process is a lot, easier and more common sense than banks. There's just a lot of factors that you have to take into consideration because, again, if we go, sideways, we just shut our doors. There's no, Daddy Jerome Powell can't come and save us, unfortunately.
Right. So how are you thinking about managing risk in this situation?
I think for us, since we lend on assets like homes, if you look back over the last few years, I mean, COVID, they printed a ton of money, and the asset prices went crazy, right? Which is good for investors that are selling properties to an extent. The tricky part with housing, though, is at some point, housing prices go up too much, you're going to have issues finding buyers that can afford it, right? Home affordability is a huge problem. And so from one aspect, it seems good, on paper. They're going to print money. All of our investors are going to make money on the deals. But at some point, that's going to become a double edged sword because you're going to have people be priced out of the home affordability in markets. And it's going to be a little bit, it's going to be a little bit tougher to find buyers. So, from our perspective, there's always going to be people that want to, own homes. I think the way that we manage risk is we're a little bit more selective about the properties that we take on, in the sense that, like, if you're going to do a luxury property, it's got to be in an area with super high demand, because what ends up happening in the housing market is, like, you have, say you're doing a 300, 400, $500,000 home. I would say anything between 300K and a million at this point.
Hmm.
You're going to have a bigger buyer pool there than you're going to have for, homes that are $1 million and up, right? And so when you have uncertainty in the market, you're really not going to see that market get, hit too hard, because there's just so many buyers there. What you're really going to see is on the luxury side, like maybe somebody who was going to buy $1.5 million home is now being a little bit more conservative because of the tariffs, because of all of this uncertainty. Look, maybe they had, 5 million in the stock market, and now they're freaking out, right? Because it's 4.5 million almost overnight.
Hmm.
So now, instead of buying a $1.5 million house, they're buying, 1.2 or 1.1, and they kind of slowly trend towards that, that other bracket. So that's kind of how it's a long way to say it, but that's how we manage risk on the construction side of things, is that you'll typically find those, 300K to $1 million houses, depending on which kind of part of the country you're in, are going to be the least risky, in an environment like this.
Yeah, so that 100% makes sense. How do you feel that what's going on with these tariffs? I feel like you shouldn't look at market short term, because this is just going to cause the Fed to lower interest rates, and the government to refinance its debt. And that's kind of what we knew. That's what we knew would play out for a while now. The interest rates have been high. They were raised abnormally higher and faster than they ever were before. And now this tariff situation is causing markets to dump, which will force the Fed's hand. And a lot of countries are now, working with the US as far as the tariffs, but with this whole China situation, how do you see that playing out?
Yeah, it's a great question. I've been looking at this a lot, and I think that X is a funny place, right? Because it's social media, right? So everybody's got this, like, short term, like I like to call it, like, microwave mentality, right? 30 seconds, and then you're on to something new. I think that the way that they did it was great, in the sense of, like, hey, we're not fucking around. We're going to get everybody's attention here. You know what I mean? And look, it caused a lot of chaos, but you're going to see they're not going to be dumb about it, right? So, like, for instance, let's go back to the Canada example, and we can use China too. But if people are struggling to build homes, what are they going to do? They're going to go back to Canada, and they're going to give an exemption on the things that we actually need. And I think that that's more of the purpose of the tariffs, is, like, let's figure out what we actually need to import from these countries, and let's loosen tariff guidelines there. But let's also make sure that people aren't getting one over on us on stuff that we can produce here. You know what I mean? And honestly, like, let's squish these other countries a little bit and see who starts to squirm, right? I mean, again, I don't trust politicians, but apparently there's 60 plus, countries already negotiating with us, right? And the reason is we have exported our debt, but we're also massive consumers. So these tariffs hurt these other countries just as much as they hurt us, right? And the US, because of the, status they have, not only with the dollar, but because of how many people and how much we consume here, these other countries are going to get hit just as hard, if not harder. Which puts, like, it's not like a no leverage situation. I mean, if you're a small Latin American country, right? If you're in El Salvador, right, and you're trying to play hardball, but you barely, like, if you put tariffs on somebody, they don't even notice that that they're, that they're not selling to you anymore. It's a lot tougher to play hardball, but we have what 350 million Americans. Like we are big buyers of all this stuff, so it just makes sense to like look. Even if say from all of the countries on average we get taxed 30%, like aggregately on average. If we get that number down to 15%, because some countries are still at 30, but now some are at zero, like that's a win for the country. And so I think that that's the model that they're going with. I do think part of it was to try and force the 10-year, the 10-year rate down because they have the debt to refinance. But it's a nuanced thing. I'm of the opinion like just let it play out, and I think you can really see on Twitter who's levered in the wrong places because they're freaking out. Like S&P drops 7% or 4% or whatever it was, and people are like screaming for bailouts. Like that's fucking crazy. Like how levered are you guys to where
Yeah,
4% is causing you to like, not be able to lose sleep, not be able
right.
to get sleep at night. So that's kind of my approach, with it. I think we'll see strategic tariffs. I mean, we already saw in China that like there's certain things that we're keeping, we're putting a pause on the tariffs for. Like that's what we're going to see. And like we're going to see who actually has leverage over us versus who we have leverage over, which again, I think is good, at least until you can make stuff here, right? Some of this stuff is going to take years to make, whether it's a factory or whatever it might be. So
Yeah.
you're going to have to play a slower game there.
Yeah, and I
Um,
think when it comes to China and what's going on and how they're standing firm, they're holding their ground. If you want to be able to produce more in the US, which is the goal to have more entrepreneurs and companies bring back jobs to the US and build here, you need to have the tooling companies, you need to have the factories built, they would need to invest in these things to kind of start up that industry, because right now there's people that I know an entrepreneur who is just about to launch his company, and he was planning to go through China, but now he's rethinking the whole thing. Do I go through a different country that I can try to create my product instead of China? Because who knows how long this will take, and you can't really do it here because it would cost like 3-4 times the amount of money to produce it, and there really isn't the tooling in America. So it's almost like we need this to come back to America, but it will take years for them to build this stuff unless they jumpstart the production of these companies to help people produce things here. So I don't know how
it's
that's all.
just,
Yeah,
yeah, I was going to say, it's just like the commitment of like, hey, here's what we're doing, which has gotten companies fired up, in my opinion. You know
yeah,
what I mean? And I think that that's a powerful statement. And they're trying to back that up as much as possible. And these guys aren't like, there's a tendency. Look, a lot of politicians are stupid. I'll say that, but like these guys are not stupid. Like they're not going to commit one political suicide by just tanking everything. And two, they're gonna, like I said, they're gonna look at they're just taking a sharper look at like what do we actually import and what is absolutely necessary. And like I think that's where you'll see the most lenient tariffs. And
yeah.
aside from that, I think things are going to go on largely unchanged. I mean, you're seeing all the exemptions that are given, so I think it's blown out of proportion.
And the
And
exemptions is that I think from as far as last night was the Apple iPhone manufacturing and computers and all that stuff. Did they actually give the exemption for that? Do you know?
I don't know if they actually finalized it. I know that's what was circulating, but look, I
Mhm.
wouldn't be surprised if they did. I mean, they're not. It's not. Again, there's the political element here. They're not going to have iPhones go to $10,000 a phone. They're just not
Well,
going to.
and that's why even though it's not a bailout when it comes to like Apple saying, "Hey, if you guys, keep these tariffs as far as if you don't exempt Apple, then the iPhone price will keep skyrocketing. Everything that Apple makes would go up in price." But in a roundabout way, I feel that by doing the exemption, if that's what they actually did do, it almost seems like we're trying to play hardball with China so they can, bend the knee and work with us, But when you do give these exemptions for some stuff, it's like, it's because a company like Apple is one of the Magnificent Seven, and they're feeling like not only will their prices of their products go super high, and then if they're not selling, they have risk to go bankrupt. So it's almost like a roundabout way of a bailout, because it's like,
Yep.
hey, fine, we will allow this because we know that if you go down, everyone that's invested in Apple will have issues, and it could be like a systematic infection of crisis, spreading through the system. So I think that they are sort of making this exemption because they know that it could be a big issue since so many people are invested in big companies like that.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, look, the Mag 7 is all tech, right? When you think about it. And the Mag 7 is also responsible for 93%, I think, of the gains in the S&P 500. Yeah. I mean, like if you're going to talk about centralization versus decentralization, you look at the rest of the S&P and they're, the gains are almost flat. Almost everything comes from the Mag 7. So yeah, those guys are going to have they're going to have say again because of the political ramifications. Like there's a lot of people that have money, whether it's 401k or whether they're in the stock market. The way that I kind of see this playing out, and this is just like a theory that I kind of thought about this morning when I was going over all this stuff, is like when you think of um, Trump's voter base, it's like 50% Midwesterners who just want factory jobs and just want things done in America, right? And then you have like 50% of the people that are being affected right now, like today, because of like the stock market stuff, right? They're all heavily invested in stocks. And, right now it seems like catering to the 50% that are the Midwestern, right? Like the middle class Americans. And I think the only way, I think there's strategy behind this. So like, and I'll try to put this as concisely as I can. So follow with me here a little bit. But how are you going to show 50%, like that 50% middle America? How are you going to show them that you're going to bring jobs back, right? It has to actually be start to be done. So like, yeah, they can't make these factories overnight, right? But if he shows this voter base that they're committed to it, they're going to see the factories going up in their town. They're going to see the millions and hundreds of millions. I think it might even be billions of investment that is getting funneled to the U.S. So like that, in my mind, they're trying to check that box first because you're like everybody on Twitter, you as well. You're absolutely right in the sense that it's going to take a long time to actually, build this stuff. But just like the starting of building it and the money that's announced that's flowing in so that we can reshore, like that's going to make that voter base feel heard for the first time in 50 years, right? So even if they're not necessarily reaping the benefits, it would make sense logically that if they see something going in the right direction, they're going to continue to vote for the people that are going to do that,
Right.
right? That are going to finish up those projects.
Hmm.
Now, the reason I think he's doing this now is because he can't do this and also have the stock market, pumped at the same time. So it's like now go win that voter base, go show them that progress is being made here and that things are coming here. And then what are they going to do? They're going to pivot and we're going to see all time highs in stocks and all this stuff through this kind of like exemption process and, tariff. Like the thing about, we talked about the Mag 7. The thing about the Mag 7 and the S&P 500 is like, yeah, it's all centralized, but if you want to fix the problem of what the S&P is going through, just fix the problems of those 7 companies and then you'll see all-time highs. So that's kind of how I think they're trying to play it out is like let's appeal to these middle class Americans that haven't had anybody appeal to them and actually do anything in 50 years and actually show them that we're going to do something by starting to get production going here, even if it takes 5 to 10 years to actually get it up and running. And then it's a lot easier to go back and pivot before midterms to the other 50% of his voter base that own the stocks and, investment properties and things like that. That's kind of how I see that playing out.
I think that I see that being the way it's going to go too. The other thing I wonder is the longer this trade war continues between the US and China, the it almost feels like if it lasts a long time, the US would have to print money, almost bailout, almost even if it's an indirect bailout by allowing exemptions, let's say, so that things don't collapse or cause really big problems. Um, I feel like is going to be inflating their currency to fight this whole, because again, they're losing a lot of consumers from the US. They're not being able to generate all that revenue. And I don't think their markets were doing great. I'm not 100% sure, but I think China, they already had a housing market crisis and all these things. So if this trade war continues for a long time, it's going to cause pain for our country and theirs, but it's just who's the stronger one who can hold out longer. But I feel that all leads to more inflation between two major countries in the world that would also lead to a squeeze and Bitcoin running up in price, because now you're just like these two countries that are stubborn are trying to fight it out who's going to be the winner. And I think in the meantime, they're going to have to support their economies by printing money in order to hold out longer. So I really wonder how long this will last. And I feel that this would lead to uh, Bitcoin just continuing to increase because the more fiat is floating around the world. That's what
Yep.
happens.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's multifaceted. I mean, their economy is way worse off than ours. If you look at their, stock market and things like that, it's been flat. It's almost been negative, the last decade or so. And so the thing to think about, um, the thing to think about in this case is when these when these countries like, say China, for instance, like, and this has ramifications throughout our stock market too. But when these countries are profiting off of us, right? They're in a surplus. Where do you think their money goes? It goes to the U.S. stock market. When we start to see, them not making as much money off of us, like that's going to have ramifications through the stock market.
Yeah.
And Jack Mallers was talking about this, a week or two ago. Is like that's going to cause issues with the prices of all the stuff. Like Nvidia, the stock price is like 50 times their earnings right now. Like that's crazy.
I remember hearing about that a long time ago, how not just it's the Magnificent Seven that's pretty much holding up. You said 93% of the stock market, but I heard about Nvidia too being where they have, if they start to go down, it could like tank the stock market because it's so huge. And I know people that are heavily invested in it, and I feel bad for them because I don't know. They keep saying like, "What do you think is going to happen?" I'm like, "Well, I'm pretty sure it's going to just things will turn around, because I think more things will be manufactured in the U.S. and there's always positive news coming out about the company. But they are such a giant company, like a whale of a company. I don't know how much their market cap compares to Apple or Amazon or anything or Google, but I think they're massive. And I hope that it doesn't just hurt him in general, but I know a lot of
Yeah.
people are very much invested in it. So it's like, I don't know what's going to happen with that.
Well, you start to have that realistic conversation of like, what am I actually investing in here? Because it's not just Nvidia. I mean, it's like all of those companies are 25, 30, 40, 50 times earnings. Why are they being valued? Are they that master executors that like why are they being valued so much, right? And you start to have that conversation, and it's just because a lot of foreign capital is flowing into our stock market because it's been like the state safe haven. But now we're telling all these countries like, hey, get your money and get the fuck out. You know what I mean? And so it's like, what are these? That's the other part of it that relates to Bitcoin is like, now if you have you're telling other countries to kind of get the hell out of our markets. One, where's the liquidity in the stock market going to come from? Two, where are they going to put their money? Right. Like if you're the Chinese government, are you putting it into your own stock market or are you putting it into a neutral reserve asset?
Right. I
Right?
know that's a huge, great point because yeah, if they're going to be pulling out of our stock, then well, what do you put it in? Your stock market that's been flat for however long, 10 years, I
Yeah.
think you said. So it's something that you want to put it in something that's going to appreciate. And Bitcoin is, I feel, the way that people are going to start moving towards that decentralization. Because I heard somebody mention too that this trade war with China, and they say that this will just cause, like, China wants to be the world reserve currency, but that doesn't seem possible in this new world that we're living in because people don't trust, just like how the Byzantines, the Byzantine generals problem was solved with Bitcoin. It's that whole idea that nobody trusts the other person and we can't agree on anything. So if you make China the world reserve currency, like, people are already losing trust in the dollar, then now you're going to ask everyone to trust China. That's not going to happen. So that's why Bitcoin would win, because it solves that problem. You don't have to worry about trusting each other. No one can be locked out of it like they did to Russia. So it just seems like the end game, is that where it won't be China winning over the U.S. It won't be, I don't think the U.S. dollar will continue to have that role in the future, and I think most Bitcoiners believe that. You do need something decentralized, but yeah, whatever your
It
thoughts are on that.
yeah, it might be like I could see the US dollar being like the global reserve currency, right? Like settlement layer, but it's not going to be what people hold their excess capital in, right? Like I think that the fiat, you know, currency in general, like that world order and that thought process has just been debunked left and right. And like all of every developed country in the world is panicking right now because you they've seen it play out for the US, right? Like we've hollowed out our infrastructure for 50 years. Now we make nothing here and all we export is debt and the quality of life has gotten worse. Like every other country has seen this experiment play out. So like who's going to volunteer, right? Like who's going to say, "Oh, we'll do that." And like for China, like I've never really gotten why they would want to do it because they have all the manufacturing there. Like typically, what you're trying to do when you're a reserve currency is export debt. So you want to get rid of all that. So like that, even, I'm not saying that they didn't want to do it, but like that never really made sense for me. Like logistically speaking, why would they kind of give all that up? I think if you look right now, we have it very we have it very bad as far as like a sovereign debt crisis, but like China's economy is way worse. Japan's economy is way worse. Like the European Union is falling apart. They're talking about one CBDCs, but they're also talking about, starting a sovereign wealth fund essentially with their citizens savings, which is just so fucked up. So like all of the reason all of this is happening, I mean, Germany sticks out too because they have massive energy problems because they've shut down nuclear plants there, in favor of this green initiative bullshit. So like there's so many issues debt wise that like all of this stuff is going to sort of unwind. And I think it's, look, you said like where do we go? I do think it's gold or Bitcoin, but the issue then becomes like nobody trusts each other anymore. So, like, are you really going to trust that, you know, China's gold is backed 1 to 1 with everything that they give out? Like, say they make a new currency, right? A new gold backed currency. Who's going to trust that the new yuan is backed 1 to 1 with gold?
And how will we know when China doesn't even let us know anything that's going on over there already as it is? How would we even know that
I'm,
they have the gold that they say they have? And then when it comes to our gold reserves, like in Fort Knox,
yep.
we heard that they were going to audit that, but we still don't know if it's there or how much is there, or has it been melted down and covered over other pieces? Like, will someone verify that? How do we know how much gold there is? So yeah, when people are owning gold on the stock market, I keep hearing, like, I even heard someone mention to me yesterday. I tried having this debate with a friend who understands Bitcoin. We've talked about it many times. They understand it, but for some reason it's not clicking in his mind. Like, he still thinks that gold is what people would run to. And I'm telling him, if there was no Bitcoin, okay, fine. What are you going to buy a bunch of gold and have it sitting in your home? then what if someone breaks in and steals it, or
Yep.
something happens to it? Or would you buy stock in gold? And how do you know, like, they could just keep adding more paper version of that? You don't know how much gold there actually is. What are you actually buying? What are you actually owning? And if you wanted to travel with the gold, I tried to tell them these things. Like, you can't just take your gold and run and carry bags of gold with you wherever you want to go. And if you leave the country too, and you want to just leave America for whatever reason in the future, you can't just say, I'm taking my American stock market gold with me. You have to sell that. So I just think people still, it's so weird to me that even though he says he understands Bitcoin, I think it's because, um, you know, people just still don't understand that much about it. They must say, like, I get it, but they don't really get it, if they're saying that. So yeah, it's definitely the only option, I think, in our opinion, is why would you get gold when you can get Bitcoin? So
Yep.
that's just the way we see things playing out.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, look, like it's also gotten a lot more real for a lot more people because like 4 or 5 years ago when we talked about this stuff, we were like, hey, they can actually like freeze your funds and like the bank and the money in the bank's not actually yours. The gold that you own is not actually yours. I mean, like we've seen examples of this over and over again, right? Like a few months ago there was like a run on gold in the Bank of England, right? And they were struggling to get people were actually trying to withdraw their gold and they were struggling to find all the gold for it. Why? Because they papered over it,
Hmm.
right?
Right.
It's already happened. Like that's I also think that the gold of price the price of gold, sorry, is probably being suppressed right now. Like it's just it whenever they have the option to paper over it, they're going to do that because they hold the actual asset, right? They hold the gold. So why not just paper over it if people are never going to take it?
Yeah.
And now again, like we've seen the Canadian truckers be debanked. We saw the whole crypto industry be debanked. Like all of this stuff was just theory 5, 6 years ago for most
Yeah.
of the developed, at least for the developed world, right? Third world countries, they've seen all of it, right? And us in our little bubble, we were like, oh, that'll never happen to us. It'll never happen, it'll never happen here, right? And then we saw it, right? We saw it actually happen here. And
And if
so,
people think that China's yuan would become the world reserve currency, with everyone seeing what happened, not only with all that stuff, but with Russia, how Russia was sanctioned and taken off the SWIFT system, then it's like, okay, we're having a problem with the USA. Russia is now not allowed. So why would we have a currency? I don't know why people think China would win as far as that status, because they could just take us out of that system. So
yeah,
if we just decide, yes, okay, China's the new world reserve currency, that argument doesn't work. Because then
no,
we're going to allow ourselves to be kicked out, like Russia was from us. So and they're also a Russian ally too, aren't they? So they wouldn't play nice with us in that way. So it's just it's almost it's very chaotic, but it's also just fun to talk about it with somebody who gets it, somebody who knows about Bitcoin and who believes why Bitcoin is important. But it makes you feel that when you understand Bitcoin, this is all just kind of like funny. Like, I don't know.
it's a game. You're absolutely right. It's like a when you have a 35,000 foot view,
Mhm.
um, you can see all of this. You see all the pieces on the board playing out in real time. Meanwhile, most people are on the board just
Yeah.
freaking out as the moves play out, but they
Right.
just don't have the higher view of everything. And look, like it's not to say that anything that I've said earlier is gonna 100% play out, but it's just like you can see the moves with more clarity when you take that bigger view of everything. And honestly, like you just look, I think Bitcoiners do this sometimes too, where we just are so we like to think we have a long time horizon on everything, but you start to see it. One thing's announced and people are freaking the hell out about it, and it's like
Yeah.
you have to give these things time
I
to
think the only
materialize.
reason, I wonder if the reason in this, like, if you look at Twitter and you see people just echo chambering the heck out of all these topics, it's almost because, yeah, part of it we do it is like the people that are posting about these things are, it's engagement farming too. They're getting a lot of attention when something's trending. Second of all, we do also like to read up on a few things because it is interesting. It's kind of like just entertaining to us because we don't care. Like we're
Yep.
already outside of that system. We're already not, it doesn't really, you care more because you're in that space where this is your job right now
Yep.
and you're worried about it because you're trying to figure out your moves as far as work goes. But as far as where you save your money, you're not just like, oh my God, my entire life is in this system and my work and everything. But so yeah, I think people just start to just have this echo chamber for engagement and people just like to do it. But it is fun to watch it play out, but it's not like we care that much, especially like I said, for your work situation. Yes, you're going to care because you need to know what moves to make, but at least it's not your whole life. At least you're saving in Bitcoin and you're not like thinking that
Yeah.
all you have is your 401k and your job, and at least you have a little like an exit. You're not stuck.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think it's also given me, kind of some unique perspectives on this other world, right? Because everybody in the traditional finance world, they're all listening to the Keynesian economics of, here's what's going on and this and that, and it's really tough to it's really tough to pivot when you're listening to the wrong opinions over and over again. So like the company I work for is relatively small. I've known two of the founders since they started it, and it's kind of cool to have their ear on some of this stuff of like, here's what I'm seeing and all that good stuff. It helps us as a company, and not only does it help there, it helps with my clients, right? Like my clients are about to do multi-million-dollar real estate deals. To have somebody that kind of can make sense of all of this chaos and lend an ear on it is usually pretty valuable. So
Do you
it is
ever
very, very, very cool to see like, the Bitcoin thought of view on everything, and also like the TradFi kind of points of view on everything else.
do you also try to? I know that you're pretty close with the founders because you were there since it started. Do they listen to you about Bitcoin, or do you ever try to talk to them about anything about that, or do you just keep it super because you don't want to get like cross a line,
Yeah,
questions?
no, look, I've told them for the last 6 months that we should put, Bitcoin on our balance sheet. But it's one of those things where we are a growing company. So like MicroStrategy, it goes back to that whole thing. It's like MicroStrategy was a dying company. They were a zombie company. Sailors said it, and that's why they had to take a different approach. We've grown, hundreds of millions of dollars year over year in our actual like loan volume that we do. So it's not desperate enough yet, right? And so like they're right now they're listening to me, and I've been saying for the last 6 months, pretty much since 60K, that we should put Bitcoin on the balance sheet, and they've seen it run up to 109 and down to 75. And
Well, that's what I
so
think is interesting about these price. When Bitcoin's volatile, I think it's interesting because when you first tell somebody about it and they remember the price, oh man, when they first told me about it, it was 60,000. But it's almost like that little seed that's planted for people because even though they're not thinking about it now because they think, oh, it went up to 100K, I should have bought it because I start feeling FOMO. But then it drops down to 80K and they think, well, it could drop more, it could drop to
yeah,
60 again. So they start thinking about it. It's almost like the seed is planted, but I feel that every time Bitcoin's price goes up, they play that mind game with themselves. Like, should I have gotten it? They get FOMO, it drops. Then it almost like every time it drops, they start to think again, should I just get in now? And I think like at one point it'll click for them. And that's why people say like you get Bitcoin at the price you deserve because you do play these mind games with yourself when you think, okay, I heard about this thing. Will it go up? What's a good time? But eventually you end up getting into it. But I think that at least that seed is planted where they remember you mentioning it and they'll keep remembering every time they see the
yeah.
price go up or down.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I've been more vocal about it, obviously, recently with the the last run up that we had. I don't want to call it the bull market because I don't think the bull market has started yet. But the I could see them potentially doing something next cycle, right?
Hmm.
Because I do think we're going to have a pretty sizable run up here. And maybe I'm wrong, but like all signs point to, a couple $100,000 per Bitcoin this year. And I think that's going to be like their oh shit moment, of like, oh, you were telling us to put, you know, a,
And
yeah,
I think the bigger money that people play with, when you have people who start off with a little money, they're looking for a way out. They find Bitcoin, they find out what's great about it. But when you have companies with bigger and bigger amounts of cash reserves, it's almost like the higher the price goes, the more they're interested. Because it's like
yeah,
now it actually matters. Now I think it's not going anywhere. Now I think this thing must be important. Because when it reaches their radar, their level of what might be something that they should be looking at, or their market cap reaches a certain amount, like Bitcoin's market cap reaches a certain amount that's actually like they can't help but look at it. When they think it's too small for them, they just so I just think that the larger the price gets, it attracts larger people because they actually start to care or look at it, because
yeah,
it's almost like you think about rich people who have all these luxury cars and luxury homes and all this stuff, and um it's they wouldn't look at a basic car to buy. They want to look at the luxury car because, oh, this is a nice new car, that's the shiny new thing that I want.
yep,
But if it's just something that's kind of like, well, what is this thing, I don't care, but once it attracts their attention, then it's like, now it's worth it, so it's almost like you'll
yeah.
buy it for a higher price. I don't know, that's just kind of what
No,
I
I
think.
I agree. I mean, look, and I think like risk profile matters for a lot of these big companies. And like by no means are we a multi-billion dollar company or anything like that. Like I said, it's a 6-year old company, it's a startup. So like we don't have those sort of cash reserve balances. But I think for like the bigger companies, when we're talking publicly traded companies, the risk profile is the number one thing they're looking at, which is like, hey, what are the chances this goes up versus going to zero? And I think for the first time ever, they've started to see that like, whoa, the chances that this goes up, not only a little bit but a lot, are huge versus the chance that it goes to zero. Like risk adjusted right now in the 80 to 70 to 100K range, I think it's the best time ever to buy Bitcoin, because there's so much shit that people don't realize that happened over the last 16 years since it started. I mean, there's so many things that like there used to be like genuine concerns of like waking up in the morning and like the network not being there anymore.
Mhm.
Right. And we're kind of past that now. Obviously, like there's always going to be stuff that comes up, but I think that that's why there's so much like infighting in the Bitcoin community right now, is because we really don't have a real enemy,
Yeah.
for the first time in a very long time.
Yeah.
Like it's like the government's on people's side, and now ever like like you don't have the block size war anymore. Like all of those things were massive, massive.
You're right. There is within it's such a good thing that you bring that up, because within the Bitcoin community, within the crypto community, like all these years, you did have the block size wars. You had people trying to create all these forks and different better versions and what's going to be the next Bitcoin and a lot of that stuff. And I think that there's been a lot of uncertainty about if Bitcoin will be the one. Like, will there be, was Bitcoin, like people thought it was Bitcoin the MySpace, and now there's going to be a better, but now it's come to a point where anybody who understands the cryptocurrency space knows that Bitcoin is it. And it's now, again, adopted by governments, and it's not going to where, you're right. It's the first time that you can say that this thing is actually at the beginning of its actual growth. Like, even though it grew from nothing
Yep.
to hit $100,000 in 16 years, people think, wow, that's insane. But it's like, when you think about it from what you just said, that this is the first time nobody's actually trying to fight it or makes like convince people that it's not going to be the one that's going to last. But now it's being embraced that way, like it will be around. That is a pretty humongous turning point. So this little slow point that we're seeing
Yep.
right now is like the curve that actually causes that massive suddenly phase, is what I see.
Well, you're also like, think about it in the perspective. If you have somebody that's got a $10 million or $100 million net worth, go back to what Sailor says. People are just looking for a way to preserve that wealth into the future. So like you're very unlikely to invest in something even if you think it has a 1% chance of going to zero if you have that much capital, right? You're much happier to do the S&P 500. You're much happier to do, a 60-40 bond portfolio. And I think that's where you're going to start to see this capital come in is like somebody that's got $100 million allocation, maybe now instead of writing off Bitcoin completely, they put 5 million bucks in, right? And they're happy with that's the other thing. Like we, as, plebs, a lot of times we're looking at like these like 100x or 50x returns that we see in the future. Not everybody is looking at it through that lens. Like we look at it through that lens because that's like life changing wealth that can set up generations to come if you have enough of it, right? Most people that have money already, like the people that are coming to Bitcoin now, they're looking at it from a different lens. They're like, like shit, if this doubles the S&P, like I'm in. You know what I
Right.
mean? And like
That's
that's
really,
where I think we're kind of going is like and that's why I don't think like the bull market has started yet because you
yeah.
look at the correlation between the S&P. Like I know we had like the whole decoupling talk and I don't think we're, actually there yet, but like look at that correlation of, S&P's down 5% and Bitcoin's up 15%, right? And or I think it's 10% versus, down 5%. Like that stuff is what's important. Like those are the numbers that matter because like that's the competition,
Yeah,
right?
because now when they're looking at, okay, this kind of thing is happening in markets, even if the tariff wars slow down and things get better and they start to gain on their their S&P portfolio, just knowing the fact that before people would have thought even if there's a 1% chance that Bitcoin will go to zero, it's not worth the risk. But if you understand that, okay, I now think this is not going anywhere, it's worth putting a small portion of my humongous amount of capital in it. That is something that they would do to beat their, because they're looking at it, you're right, not to change their life. They're not looking, they're just thinking, oh, if I get double the S&P, that's cool.
Yeah. How can I make 10 million into 20 million over the next 10 years? You know
Right.
what I mean? Like that's the
Mhm.
view, which is what? It's 100% increase. That's not, you know what I
Mhm.
mean? Like it's not
Yeah.
the 100% increase is just doubling in size. What we're talking about when plebs are looking at Bitcoin is not 100% increase. You're looking at a 10,000% increase, right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of like the numbers that we're looking at. So it's you have to kind of frame that with the capital, that's going to be like investing in this. And look, that's why I think I tweeted today, like get out of crypto if you're still in crypto. If you're in anything other than Bitcoin, like this money is smart fucking money. They're not your they're not your shitcoin casino gamblers that are coming in
Yes.
and moving markets anymore, right? And so like when you look at it from that perspective, it's like there has to be fundamental use cases for this stuff. There has to be something that can't be ripped off. It's
Yeah.
like, like the people talk about XRP and like doing deals with banks and all this stuff. Like what's more likely to happen? That a bank gives control over the currency to another public organization. That's situation one. Hey, yeah, we'll do a contract with XRP and we'll use your token for finality and settlements and all that stuff. Or option two is they take the technology, they rip it off, and they make their own little shitcoin that they handle transactions with internally, right? They're just going to rip off the technology. There's no use case for any of this stuff. And I'm sick
Yeah.
of like pretending that there is.
Yeah, because you could do the same thing on Lightning if you want to trade or send Bitcoin faster on, even on the Aqua L2, that layer two
Yeah.
Bitcoin that they have. You can send large transactions, through Lightning. So yeah, there's things that are being built into Bitcoin that you don't need these coins for. Before, people thought they needed to create all these coins because they thought that they're doing something Bitcoin can't do, but Bitcoin is doing this stuff with layers. So it's really just interesting that it is unnecessary.
They're bringing they're increasing dollar hegemony across the world, and like they're allowing people like saving in Bitcoin requires steps, right? Like if you're in the third world, first you have to trade your local currency in for dollars, then you got to use your dollars to buy Bitcoin, right? Tether is allowing that transfer to happen, right? Because they're where else are these people going to get dollars? They're not going to like no Chase isn't going to put up a bank in the middle of Venezuela when it's going through, a race war. Like, you know what I mean, or whatever it is. There's no race wars in Venezuela. They're all Venezuelan, but you know what I'm saying.
some
Like
kind of,
that's
yeah, like
when there's gang
reason.
stuff going on. They're not going to put up a bank there. So what do? You use an app, and now you have people that are on board to Tether and can get access to U.S. dollars. What does that do for that? That family, right? Now they're able to save in dollars versus the Venezuelan currency. Now you actually can build a stack because your currency is not being devalued at 50% overnight and your wealth stolen. And now you can actually, start to set yourself up for the future. So I've said it a lot of times. Look, I think we need to be careful about the stablecoin regulation, right? That it's not a CBDC in disguise. So again, I think Paolo and the Tether team are against those frameworks. So we'll have to stay vigilant there and make sure that remains the case. But I think they're a net good for the world, like allowing people to get their hands on dollars when they live in places that currencies can be devalued by 50% overnight. Like that's a good thing. People should be happy about that.
Yeah.
I'd rather Tether be in control of that than it be a central bank digital currency, right? I don't
Yeah.
trust the Fed. I don't trust Fed coin to, to do that. So
Tether, as far as I know, it's a decentralized coin in that way. So where XRP or any kind of Fed coin, it would be what, 40% of the supply controlled by a few people. So
yeah, I
that's
don't
where,
know. I don't know if Tether is decentralized. I would have to check that. But even if they are centralized, there's a difference between a centralized digital currency and a central bank digital currency, right? One's a private company, the other one is used for surveillance and can be shut off. So like that's where I think that line is. It is a very fine line that, like Tether's walking. If they start giving data to governments and allow governments to shut things off, like that's where that becomes a problem. But I don't mind it even. Look, decentralized, centralized, I do think it is centralized, but I don't mind it because they're going to be, again, the difference. And somebody who's listening to this is inevitably going to tweet at me and say, what's the difference? Like, what are you talking about, you idiot? What's the difference between a central bank digital currency and a
yeah,
centralized digital currency? Look, the difference is that a central bank is run by the governments, and governments are what? They're going to be loyal to nobody. They're going to do
right.
whatever they want. A centralized company like Tether is going to be loyal to the customer first. The incent like that's the difference between a central bank digital currency and a centralized digital currency like Tether, is
Mm-hmm.
that Tether is going to answer to consumers and governments answer to nobody.
Mm-hmm.
So that intention and that aligned incentive matters so much.
Yeah, that's so true. And I think that no matter what, it's heading toward a good outcome. That's why all this stuff is just temporary sort of chaos. I think somebody shared one of the threads, or maybe it's a GIF, where when you live in the fiat world, it's all chaos, and then when you're in the Bitcoin world, it's like the slow, steady pulse. How do you like doing your podcast?
I love it.
Yeah,
I love it. We finally got the marketing up and running this week, so
really.
it's been really really cool. And yeah, look, I just love talking about the stuff. I love getting others' opinions, and I think the coolest part about it is you have all of these people with all these unique different perspectives, and you're just like constantly learning stuff every day. So it's like I'm doing the podcast, but I also feel like um, I'm like being taught,
Mm-hmm.
right? Amongst that process. And I think it's just been great. Like, it's you meet people, you get to hear their story, and like I feel like I'll be talking to these people for my entire life just about this sort of thing. So it's amazing. And yeah, we I think I have 10 episodes released now, so a few more guests coming up, and trying to do, again, just trying to do something a little bit easier to digest, but also like highlighting the reason that number goes up. It's like it's not we there's it's not just that this was divinely chosen by God and that's why Bitcoiners have the only project that's working out right now. It's because of all of these other underlying aspects that are making people flock to it,
Well,
from all over the world.
it makes you feel like that, what do they call it? The Goldilocks zone, where that's why the Earth is here because we're the perfect distance from the sun. We like, everything is
Yeah.
like just right for us to exist. That's how Bitcoin is. It's like it just worked because all these different things came together.
Yeah.
Um, that allowed it to work. It wasn't just, the math, it wasn't certain things, but that's why, yeah, you're having people being drawn to it because it's something that's just working. So I'm glad you're enjoying it. I mean, you have your marketing up and everything now. So where's that at?
Yeah. So we got it running this week. I have a team of people that are in the music business, and essentially what they're doing is they find ways to market the podcast and make it profitable. And look, they're a lot smarter than I am, but they do it for musicians, right? When you're a musician, you typically, if you're serious about it, you get some sort of marketing team that's pumping out your music and getting it out to the masses rather, and that's the goal, right? That's always been the goal with the podcast, is just to give people a unique perspective and kind of talk them through everything that we're going through currently. It is, look, you look back at it and you're like, oh wow, it dropped to 17K and then it went all the way to 100K. Like, it's so easy to just look at those as numbers on a chart, but like all of those days were individual days of uncertainty and of doubt and people getting shaken out. So I think that like the mission of the podcast is just like, let's try to help people through these times of uncertainty. And look, like when it's good, we'll party, right? It's easy to talk when things are good, but it's in my opinion been really fun to not have the price action
Mm-hmm.
while launching it, because it's given us other things to talk about and like build the foundation of why people are here.
That's great.
So it's amazing. It's so much fun, and I'm gonna continue putting out one or two a week.
Yes, you have to keep going because you're right. The more that we're doing it, we're doing it because we enjoy talking to more people about it because we see how it's changing the world. But it's nice to get more voices out there so that anybody can reach a different person and so that somebody might come across your episodes or my episodes and anybody else that's thinking about trying this. It's really nice to have our voices just more out there for people so they could hear, again, not during the price action is kind of cool because you could hear just actual people's stories and what their life is like. And it's not just like it doesn't feel like some crypto bro party where everybody's like pumping the price, yelling about how great
Yeah.
everything is. Cause it's like, then it starts to feel like we're not here for this transformation, this reason that we're doing this, because um, it is different. We're actually believing in it when the prices aren't jumping like crazy, and we're not just trying to do it for engagement or to show off or nothing like that. So
Well,
so
you
it's
can.
important. Yeah.
I was going to say, well, you can kind of see in the Bitcoin community versus the crypto community is like when price goes down, people are just gobbling it up, right? And it's like in the crypto community, you have not all, but a lot of like leverage degenerates, right? Who are like freaking out when the price dips because we were told this is going to be a bull market, but like they don't understand the fundamentals. And if they understood the fundamentals, they would be buying Bitcoin and not this other shit to begin with. So it's, you can kind of see that ethos in the community. And, it was funny. I saw a tweet by a real estate investor. It was probably about a month or two ago now. And he was like, can somebody explain why Bitcoiners go nuts every time the price drops? He's like, I've never seen any asset like this. And like that was his start down the rabbit hole, right? Because he owns real estate. So he wants the price to pump. And, whenever his asset prices are going down, he's like, oh shit. Meanwhile, he sees this other community and it's like, we have a party when the price goes down. It's like,
Right.
what the hell is going on? right? And it speaks to the ethos of the Bitcoin community, right? And it goes back to that like Bitcoin crypto discussion that we had earlier, which is like the ethos of this community is that you don't sell because Bitcoin is the money, right? Unless you're 100% allocated like me, then you sell to pay bills every month. I'm using it both ways. But like when you're storing and you're putting like 10 or 20% in this thing, you're not, it's the last thing you touch because it is the actual money, right?
Hmm.
And in all these crypto projects, I'm being nice, I'm not calling them shit coins, but in all of these crypto projects, what is it? It's like you want the price to pump so you can get rid of it. Like
Yes.
fundamentally, if you want to
Yes.
understand, if you're listening to this podcast and you're like, all right, why Bitcoin versus anything else? Like this is the point to get.
Yes.
When the price goes up in Ethereum, people are happy so they can sell it and get into Bitcoin. When Bitcoin
It's
goes up,
true.
it's true. And when Bitcoin goes up, people are still just DCAing into it, right? They're trying not to sell it. They're only selling it for what's necessary. But it's like that's the fundamental difference between what we're looking at right now. And that's why Bitcoin doesn't go to zero. It's like because who's gonna sell it? It's
Right.
like, it's like it's just not
You're
it's
so
not
right.
not
Even
in
the
the ethos.
Yeah, even the traders that are thinking, I'm going to sell this coin if I get out at the right time to be rich or whatever, they do want to keep, like, to sell for fiat, and they do want to have dollars in the bank. But also, a lot of those people that understand crypto, they feel like they're trading to try to get more Bitcoin. So it's like they're not like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? They're not just, they actually do want the better asset. They understand what crypto is to be trading crypto in the first place. But I think that they do it to think like in that mindset where you're right. The rest of us, we're not trading it. We're just, if it drops, we get to have more for a cheaper price. It's on sale. And it's an entirely different group of people. So it's like that's a really great point. Mhm.
That's like my story in a nutshell. Like I got into Bitcoin first and I was like, oh, I'm late. Um, and I was trading, meme coins to try to make more Bitcoin. And luckily, I lost my first $1,000 because I'm not good at trading, and that was it.
Yeah.
And so like that's I think the main, like I think a lot of these guys that are still here that have been around for multiple rug pulls, like they're
Mhm.
still chasing that high of like, well, if this thing goes 50x and I have a grand in it and I make 50,000, I can buy a half.
Well, it also reminds me that some of these people that have really big channels that are discussing trading and they have like a lot of viewers on YouTube, it makes you wonder that because if they're talking about some little coin and saying, oh, it's about to break out, you better get in on this coin, they're the ones kind of pumping the price to get all their viewers to go
Yeah.
buy some. And then they dump on your ass. So it's kind of like, are
Yeah.
they, because if it's such a small market cap, on a coin they're talking about that you're like, oh, I didn't think to look at that one. It's so small. I'm going to be rich because it's got a little market
Yeah.
cap.
That's why a lot of these guys do it. I mean, you saw it with Fred Krueger did it, right? He
Yeah,
like claims he was a Bitcoin maxi and like did a rug pull. It was weird. It was funny because it was right when I got back on Twitter. It was like the night
mhm,
he did it. And
really?
I was like looking at it. I'm like, this guy like claims he was a maxi and then out of nowhere rug pulls for 250 grand, right?
Yeah,
Makes like 250K on it. And then what? I'm sure he bought Bitcoin with it.
right. That's what it is. Yeah.
And
So
so it's a very interesting market to be a part of, and that's why these people do it, right? Like that's why you see the influencers launching their own coins. You saw the Haktua coin, right? Like that girl made millions of dollars and wasn't prosecuted for it. I'm
right.
not saying she should be prosecuted for it. I think that's a whole different discussion.
I know, but it's like it's also
It's a moral thing at that point.
yeah,
I just think that like if you're dumb enough to buy it, then you deserve it.
right. But that's what it is. It's like they think she's thought I'm so popular right now because I made a meme or whatever you call that, but she got insanely famous, so it's like let's make a coin. It'll get insanely popular because I'm trending right now and all this stuff. And then you can make a crap ton of money really fast. So it's like, yeah, it's your fault for falling for it and thinking this is going to be something. So yeah, it sucks. People do lose money, but that's how you learn. And It's definitely a good lesson to learn. Don't trust these traders on YouTube with a lot of followers because they're probably just pumped up the price enough to get you to think it's going to moon or something. So, just
I'm grateful that I'm grateful that I didn't get lucky with the meme coins and like think that I was some sort of genius. Like a lot of these people have just been lucky because the altcoin market is, like alt season was a thing. But it's just like a lot of those guys did get lucky and now they're delusional and they think it's going to be a thing because they got lucky, right? It created this false sense of like, I'm a god at trading and like,
That's like a
I'm
gambler going to Vegas and you're like, oh, I won this time. I'm going to win every time I go to Vegas. I'm so good at gambling, but
yeah,
you don't win every other time you lose. So
yeah,
I don't know.
exactly. It's this, but because there's charts in this analysis and number go up, like people actually thought that it had more merit than a casino. And you're going to continue to see that. I mean, new coins are being made every day. There's going to be some that claim to be, the next Bitcoin or this or that. And it's not going to happen. I would say if, I placed $100 on Bryson DeChambeau to win the Masters yesterday. I would say you're better off, picking the winner of a golf tournament than picking the next Bitcoin,
Yeah,
or picking the next meme coin that competes with Bitcoin or tries to.
seriously.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining me. I have had a great talk with you. This has been great to discuss all these things.
Happy to be
Thank you
back.
for joining me on your show and good luck with your show. I am so happy for you that you have the marketing going. You have a team behind you. You have friends that are helping push your content to reach more people. So that's what's important. And again, it's not because it helps. We don't want like the more people it reaches, the price will eventually go up. And you know that we celebrate
Yeah.
when the price does drop because we get more of it. So yes, but we still, because we care about everybody and we want people to also know that there's an exit, we do want to let people know, and we want to spread the word and get our content out there. So everyone follow Hold My Beer show, right?
Yeah.
Hodl My Beer, Hodl My
Yeah.
Beer show. And I'm
On
going to link it.
on YouTube. Yeah.
Yes. I'm going to link
We're
it. I'm going to link your page and whatever else you want me to link. So whatever else you want to tell everybody.
Yeah, no, thank you. It's I'm glad we got together again. I had so much fun, when we had you on a little while back. So it's good to be on here,
Thank you.
and kind of share a little bit, especially with all the craziness going on. I guess the last thing that I would say, to everybody is look, like number go up is still important because that's how people's lives change, right? But what's to your point, what's more important is that numbers going up because more plebs are buying the supply, not necessarily because BlackRock is or because the U.S. government is. And the more people that we can speak to and get on these get on the train, so to speak. It's good for humanity, right? And so that's kind of I think the mission between both of our podcasts is just to kind of spread the good word, as we see it and with what's going on. But yeah, you guys can follow the show on YouTube at Hodl My Beer Show. And I'm giving away a bid axe at 250 subscribers, so we're about
Nice.
quarter away there. And you guys can
Awesome.
find me on Twitter, at Mr. Mr. Trey Arch. So pumped to come on here, and thanks so much for having me, Staci.
Thank you so much. Thanks for joining me. Have a great rest of the day.
Thanks. You too.
Take care. Bye bye.